back in the day, I had always liked to explore different virtual worlds, and Active Worlds is one of those. I actually know Active Worlds was the first one. Second Life is what I should have been talking about.
Hmm.
In there's a bunch of people who do things like they put on plays and that sort of thing, but there's also people who make what's called machinima, and this was before Halo. So there's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
people playing Halo, and it was moddable. So there was a whole bunch of people using Halo to make movies at one point. But before they were doing it, there was a whole bunch of other, like, if you go look up the history of machinima, it actually goes back to some game that wasn't Halo that
Hmm.
you could write. You could mod it by writing scripts for it, and the non-player characters would come in, and you had timeline kind of thing through scripting. And so people would go, "Hey, great! I'm going to go write a script, and this game engine will kind of produce a cut scene according to my script, and I'll record it, and there's my movie." So that's sort of the bare origins of what machinima is. It's
Ah.
using a game engine to create a video. In Second Life is kind of like Minecraft. You go in there and you can build stuff and,
Hmm.
talk to other people and chat. It's kind of like what we're in now, Alt Space VR.
Yeah.
Around 2006 to 2010 era. I was in there building stuff and working with people who were putting on plays and other things to create machinima. Basically, they needed somebody to go and record stuff. Some of us had these devices. It sort of goes down to a hardware thing. So there's a device called a Space Mouse made by a company called 3D Connection, and it's
Hmm.
a really nice precision controller for working in 3D apps. So, one of the biggest issues with trying to build stuff in a 3D app is how do you move around the scene? And to make something 3D, you have to look at it from all angles. You can't just go, "Oh, it looks right from the front," and like you don't know that
Right.
this
Yeah.
part is like 2 feet back of where it should be. So orbiting around an object, rotating things, very important. And that's why they made this device, and they made drivers for it to work with, all the top 3D apps like 3D Studio Max and
Hmm.
Blender and all these other things. In fact, there's a driver for it for Unity, and it would probably be only maybe 25% as productive as I am. It's like really is like quadruples your productivity.
Okay.
So anyway, the first encounter I had with these devices was in Second Life, and it was when they first came out. And someone went, everybody's going, "Ooh, look at those neat things," and I was actually doing the cinema at the time because I could
Hmm.
script the camera. So, that's the equivalent of a director of a movie being able to go onto a location and saying, "Okay, sorry, ma'am, I know this is your house, but we're going to bolt some rails to the floor," and all this sort of things that they kind of do to prepare a location to be used for a movie. Uh,
Right.
and then they use the rails. They run the camera physically down the rail, and that's how they get nice smooth camera
They get
transitions and
their
all that
shot.
sort of stuff. That was kind of piqued my interest at the time, that without buying all this expensive equipment and doing that for real, that you could do this in virtual reality. That's where I got into building 3D stuff a lot as well. There's a competition called the 48-hour film project,
Hmm.
and it takes place in real life, and they were doing it in, I don't know, 200 cities around the world or whatever at the time. And someone in the Second Life Machinima community, well, I know who she was. Her name was Chantel Harvey, and well, she was my best friend in Second Life, and
Hmm.
she, was doing a lot of this machinima stuff um, when I came along, and we sort of got into a partnership kind of thing because I understood the scripting and all the technical stuff, and she was just like, "Oh my God, could you do this? Could you do that?" So I started helping her. She actually gained a bit of notoriety. At the time, Second Life was kind of a big deal. It was getting a lot of real life press and that sort of thing. So she was actually getting a lot of real publicity from the fact that she was doing this. So she basically asked the 48-hour film project people, can we do one of these 48-hour film things in Second Life? And they were like, oh, well, that's a weird thing, but sure,
Mhm.
why not? We do it in all kinds of cities and all that sort of thing. So they started this event. That basically that was one of the big deals. One of the things that really kept me in there was each year they would have this event, and I think
Mhm.
I maybe had 4 or 5 years worth of doing this
Oh.
in Second Life. The neatest part of it is in the final year that I did it, and basically the year that I won all the prizes, basically,
Uh-huh.
they the judge that they got, and they always sort of got one sort of tried to get one well-known judge, and then some other technically good judges who maybe weren't as well known. But
Mhm.
they got Tony Dyson. He was the special effects guy who worked for, I think it was Pinewood Studios, who did the Star
Oh,
Wars movies,
Star Wars. Yeah,
and
sure.
he invented the R2D2 robot,
Oh.
among other props. So he was a film guy who was into creating film props. He was in the film
Mhm.
business. At that point in his life, he was very interested in the concept of pre-visualization, which is sort of okay. You get 100 scripts at the script factory where they look at them and they throw
Right.
98 of them away, and they come down to, well, we got two things we might want to do. How would they look? But we don't want to do full budget, full production. So we want to quick and dirty, how would this look? How, we want to
Mhm.
pre-visualize what the movie's going to look like. That's what sort of got him into Second Life. And a friend, and actually after I left, he and Chantal Harvey kind of became good friends and sort of made a business out of doing pre-visualizations for real movies and real productions in Second Life. That's kind of a story of Machinima,
Huh.
what it is,
Right.
and how
How
it
it started.
fits into this. Well,
Yeah.
what we're doing is Machinima. I mean, oh my God, I just realized
Yeah.
we're actually
We're
participating in a Machinima right
Yeah,
now.
we're in this
So,
virtual. Well, first, I just want to say, thank you for joining us on Everything Metaverse, and we've been engaging in Pete right away. We're talking about Machinima Universe and theater and the idea like of how that's impacting sort of virtual reality today in these virtual worlds. And I mean, even today, right now, and of course, my name is Bobby Carlton. Thanks for joining us. Even right now, we're seeing like virtual reality theater, right? We're seeing people are using platforms like VR chat, and they're using. I saw a production of Peter Pan here in Alt Space, like a little over a year ago, and you're seeing other platforms come up, and of course, this, people saying we talk about Second Life, how Second Life was like this, So
well,
maybe
here's
I
the
don't know.
thing.
Do a lot of people know
One
about
of,
Second Life?
and this sort of is a dividing line, and there's two
Hmm.
opposing forces meeting in the middle here at the same time. But the dividing line is machinima needs to be real time. So it's a
Agreed.
game engine that's being recorded with
Yeah.
real time puppeteering. Like when you see my hands moving and my head moving, that's what we would call puppeteering. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to get the input for that. I mean, everybody's
Hmm.
probably seen the footage of people wearing ping pong balls and rubber suits with
Yeah.
the
Yes. Yes.
cameras,
And you
and
run.
so that's photogrammetry. It's measuring where things are based on pictures from a bunch of different
Mhm.
angles. But nowadays we have these cool IMUs that we talked about in a previous episode that are little tiny micro miniature things that can sense how the controllers are moving, and that's also
Sure.
coupled with a
It's your
bunch
hand.
of UV and visible lights that the cameras are picking up, and those two sources of information are synchronized, and you get this really deadly accurate but fast
Hmm.
update stuff going on. And they've incorporated that now into mocap suits, which is kind of like, it's becoming almost like normal clothing. It's no longer
Right.
has to be, but basically it's like clothing that has sensors at critical points in your body so that it can do
It
the
picks up
same
your
sort of thing we're doing
elbows.
with control.
Yeah.
Yeah, without having the camera, which kind
Hmm.
of opens the door to things that weren't possible before that. For example, with the ping pong ball suit, a person couldn't get in a car and then you'd be able to figure out where things are because it's occluded. You can't see it. So, but the newer mocap suits are
Hmm.
are able to operate without you being able to see the ping pong ball joints because they have these IMUs. And the other factor there is with these new mocap suits, you don't really need a big studio, which is a huge cost
Nope.
reduction thing.
Hmm.
And the suits themselves, I think when I first saw them, they were like $10,000 a piece, and I think they might be down to maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a piece now. So
Oh
they're
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
the
yeah.
software is a lot better too. So you can buy 5 of the suits,
Hmm.
put 5 people in a room all wearing the suit at the same time, record their streams synchronized.
Hmm.
And this is the kind of stuff that feeds the other part of the dividing line, which I was talking about, which is the non-real time stuff
Hmm.
that Pixar and all these other companies that have been doing for years, where it takes their supercomputer farm 3 minutes to render each frame, and that kind of sort of thing. So those two streams of the real time and the
Hmm.
non-real time are kind of meeting, and something like, for example, Nvidia's Omniverse,
Omniverse, yeah, which
which
is
is
amazing, an amazing tool.
yeah, and it's basically a super cluster of
Hmm.
GPUs that you can just throw immense amounts of 3D data at. And in the end, if you think about it, it takes a lot of horsepower for a computer to do all the calculations and whatever to display a picture for your eye each frame, right? But
Hmm.
in the end, all that's important is that they display a picture for each eye in the end, right? So, and this is sort of like something that Google had something called Stadia, which is the
Hmm.
concept that we're not going to put a whole bunch of 3D hardware in your headset or on your desktop or in your laptop. We're just going to send you a frame over the internet 60 times a second, which is sort of a tall order. But with
Hmm.
video compression, I mean, on the other hand, everybody watches video over the internet. You know what I
Sure.
mean? The big problem is it's buffered or not buffered. You know what I mean? So the reason we're able to watch video over the internet is because they send me 10 seconds or something of video ahead of time, and they don't even start playing until they have that buffer,
Right.
and then they can hide any little glitches, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean,
But
because
it's much more
yeah.
difficult with something that's supposed to be a real-time game server. So
Yeah, I mean, you don't run into the issues, right? I mean, you no longer hear that phrase like it's buffering, right? Like, I feel like that, like young kids these days don't have to suffer through, right? Like, oh, it's buffering. Like I remember, you know, 10 years ago, I was like, oh my God, it's buffering. I have to wait it out, and so
yeah, I
technology's
mean,
obviously changed, right?
to a 20-year-old 10 years ago is like I was 10 years old. I mean, that's
Yeah,
forever,
yeah,
right?
but yeah,
But
but technology's
I'm an
changed.
old geezer, and I'm like, yeah, 10 years ago, that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
The
But but,
relativeness
um,
of
but but
time.
look where we've come with virtual platforms, right? Virtual reality platforms, and not only just like how we're using it in this environment, but we think about how it's used for enterprise use, right? We've gone from that idea of like originally what virtual reality as was a gaming, quote unquote gaming platform, which then became a training platform, and then we got to this idea of like digital twin was like avatars, but now we're like looking at digital twins as like an industry or as an enterprise, representation of a process. And so,
Yeah, it's. I was just looking at like 3D, like a modern PlayStation video game the other day with my friend. We were remembering back when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons with dice,
Oh
and
yeah.
he would come over and read lines of BASIC from a book to me, and I would type them in, and we would get these programs running. And we at one point we put in a Dungeon Masters program that would roll the dice. So I remember the literal origins of the roots of a game engine, where it's rolling
Hmm.
dice and all of the mechanics of that
Sure.
stuff that goes into D&D. And then I remember watching over the years and seeing in magazines these improved versions of these Dungeon Master programs that were evolving, and then they were adding pictures,
Hmm.
and so I saw that stuff. And when I see this now, it's just like, oh my God, this is where this is all gone. But still, at the root of there's a whole bunch of stuff rolling dice underneath
Sure.
everything.
Well, it's
It's
interesting. I
it's
don't know,
amazing.
because I know you're on Twitter, and I know we follow each other on Twitter. Like today, I came across this footage of someone created a subway scene using Unreal Engine 5. Um, and I mean, here's the thing. When you look around this, it's impressive, right? I mean, it's cartoony, but it's impressive. Like being in this world, I can, there's depth. I can see other rooms. I can look outside the window here. This footage that I saw, this creator used Unreal Engine 5 and created this spectacular, like, I actually thought it was actual film footage. And, that's where
Well,
we've
and
gone to.
that's you're talking about that divide again, right?
Hmm.
That's what it's like. These when I'm going like this, these guys over here are the real time guys, and those guys over there are the rendering, and the big
Hmm.
CGI farms and all that kind of stuff. And these guys are like beating the pants off those guys. Like those guys will say, but if you look at the frames, there's no comparison. But then you got to say, it's like, how many people go to a theater and look at those frames and ask the projectionist to freeze the frame? It's all
Right.
compressed video now, and it's the
Hmm.
same thing I was just saying about Omniverse. Do they care whether you calculate it all in the headset, or do what? Who cares? As long as it's fast
Right.
enough and good enough, and you're only seeing it for a 60th of a second. And if you ask, um, brain and neurologists and those kind of
Hmm.
people, it's like, well, they're just fooling my brain. They're going to laugh their head
Sure.
off at you because your brain is just being fooled 24/7. What you think you're observing is almost totally made up in your brain anyway, based on some signals that you've become used to. That's why you can
Sure.
walk by things and you don't notice them, and optical illusions work and that sort of thing. So sure, we're externally messing around with the signals we're feeding into your brain, but as soon as they get it past your eyeballs, your brain is messing around with them and delaying the sound so that it lines up correctly with the video,
Hmm.
and all kinds of stuff going on like that. So it's kind of neat. We can manipulate that, and we
Sure.
can create these experiences that seem real,
Even like right
and
now, I'm
that's
talking to you,
useful.
right? I mean, you're not physically in the room with me, but you have virtual presence. Your emotions. I mean, you are here. Alan, our producer, he's over here. I can see you. I mean, if I were to take off my headset, I'm back at home, and you're no longer there. But if I put my headset back on, there you are. I mean, it's in our brains. Our brains are reading it as like, there's Pete. Pete's right here. And
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 it's
we're
really,
hanging
it's
out.
just an extension of the fact that we can create a television set and look at pictures of the television set, and
Hmm.
they're moving, and it convinces us, oh, there's like a little window and the world inside that little box and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
which itself is just an extension of the fact that you can paint a picture and have an image suggest a
Right.
story, or you can write down a bunch of words and read them, and then that will create
Well,
this story in your head, or you can listen to a recording of
mhm.
audio. So it's all manipulating the input
Sure.
and your brain can't help but have an emotional reaction to something. I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
hear different, if you hear a loved one in audio, you go, oh yeah, and you have
Mhm.
different reactions based on synthetic input, and the
Sure.
whole entertainment industry is based on that,
Well,
right?
if we think about like again, we're in virtual reality, but I mean, we have WebXR, and WebXR, even though it's on a mobile device or your desktop, it's almost like just having a window. It's like almost like standing outside a window and looking into the world, and so there's still like WebXR still
Well,
has that
and
emotional
especially, I mean,
empathy.
so there's that two steps of that. So you have like let's say you have a tablet and a full screen WebXR thing, and that's great. But no matter which way you face, it's always looking at the
Yeah.
same thing. But then you add augmented reality to that, and
Hmm.
all you're really doing is what I said about the IMUs, is where they know you're rotating something around and turning it a certain way. So you add that to the WebXR so that your camera is responding to where you hold that. And now you have a little magic window that you can go, oh, look, if I turn this over here, now I'm looking in
Here's
that direction. And that
here's this.
has a
Right.
certain,
That's what they do.
there's a certain um, inescapable emotional reaction. Like you physically react to that as though it's real. And then,
Hmm.
and your mind goes, that's impossible. It's magic. And you have this sense of awe when you
Sure.
first experience that. You kind of get over it, like any having a sense of awe about anything. Eventually you go, yeah, big deal, I've seen that a million times. But the first time you see that and you're holding it, you have to be holding it, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Because then it's like, oh, if someone else is holding it and you're just seeing it, you don't get it. It doesn't hit you like it does if you
Hmm.
actually hold it. Like
Right.
one of the best AR, and a lot of people wouldn't even consider it AR, but there's more than one of them. Did any of the virtual planetarium apps
Yeah.
where you hold your tablet or your phone up to the sky and it goes, well, the sun's over there, and like,
Yeah, and
you
you
know,
can see like the
no kidding, the
constellations.
sun's over there, but there's harder
Yeah.
things like over here is there's a nebula, or here's where the planets are, and all those sorts of
Hmm.
things. Another good example of that is airplane tracker. So if oh, there's a contrail, I wonder who that was. You can hold your phone up and it'll put a little dot up there and say, oh, that was, Airbus, blah, 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 from
Oh,
here to there.
wait, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that. I'll have to find that one.
Those are a lot of useful practical applications. And, this is maybe a good time to segue into this concept that's coming up with AR glasses.
Mm-hmm.
There's talk about Apple coming out with AR glasses, and what kind of thing will they do? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you look at they're gonna go, let's look at our phone app store and figure out what the most useful stuff in there is, because duh, that's what people are gonna want in their
That's what they're.
glasses. So
Yes.
they're gonna go there and look. Well, they're gonna want weather. You know, they're gonna they're gonna force us all to have a stock market ticker because they always do that, right? But just look at the stock apps on your phone. That's really what the first generation of AR glasses
Mm-hmm.
that don't look all dorky. And you sort of got to distinguish there. There's going to be a lot of AR devices coming out that are pass through, and those you really not intended to wear those out in the world. That's
No,
more of
no.
a
But
entertainment
that's when you
device
get.
where go ahead.
Well, that's when you get like glasses like Nreal glasses, right? Nreal glasses kind of look like regular glasses, but I don't know if you just saw, but just recently, um, Microsoft, the HoloLens 2, have created a software package that's going to work with Volkswagen to allow you to wear the headset while you're driving. So,
Oh,
um,
that's wild. Yeah, that's wild.
yeah. So, and the idea, right, is to focus more on the driving and less on sort of like when you're typically driving,
Yeah.
right? You're watching this, you're watching that, you're watching your speed, and so they're hoping to use augmented reality in a way that allows you to focus more on driving, but still delivering content to you. It was just announced recently, so it's interesting, that you talk about like AR glasses,
Well,
right?
I mean,
Maybe
sort of
Apple
that's
headsets would be
kind
that
of a
way.
high-end idea, but it works if you're going to sell a device like a car that
Yeah.
is worth, I, I'm guessing this kind of car is going to be maybe 100 grand. It's not going to be one of their cheapo cars. So to sort of say we're branding
Mm-hmm.
a HoloLens, a Volkswagen version that comes with the car and it's dedicated for being used in the car, that is probably a smart move because that's sort of the beginning of, and now we're starting to build
Right. That
an
bridge.
in-car operating system for
Mm-hmm.
this holographic space. And we've sort of talked about this before. Of a car is a perfect designing a
Transportation, I
car
think,
rather
is yeah, an
is a
industry that is
perfect
ready.
application for VR. So having can you imagine all the data they're going to get if all of their
Tons.
cars
Oh
are,
yeah.
if they're all wearing headsets and now they can get the data on, oh, here's what the drivers actually do. Here's where the
Yeah.
real
That's where they're
drivers
looking.
actually move their head. Yeah.
You can track,
And
yeah, track with and the fact that like transportation services, UPS, FedEx, like they could benefit from this type of technology. And I know that UPS currently are experimenting with AR and VR. But I would think that this recent announcement with Volkswagen and Microsoft HoloLens will help, I think, push the idea of maybe giving drivers either an Apple AR headset if they ever do one, or a Microsoft one, or an Nreal glasses, or New Eyes, or whatever these headsets. There's a lot. Focus,
yeah, I think
Vive.
the biggest hurdle there is regulatory, and it sounds like
Yes, of
Volkswagen has
course.
broken through
Yep.
that. So the
I think you're going
door
to see a
becomes
lot of
open.
yes.
Yeah.
I think it's going to open up a lot of doors for what immersive technology. What is even like the idea of, like, again, we talked about digital twinning like in enterprise use, but now digital twinning of our interstates, right? The digital twinning of our roadways, and I think there's a
Well,
ton of
here's a
potential there.
perfect example that sort of ties into what you were saying with UPS, because I'm not going to say it was UPS, but I know there are major courier companies who train their drivers on specific city maps. And one of the tools I have in Unity is, or I mean, not even just generally in Unity, but there is a database, worldwide database where you can download the terrain type, the
Hmm.
elevations, the roadway locations, where there are important buildings. All of all of that information is actually available through several different mechanisms. Being able to train, let's say you've got a new UPS driver and they need to learn a certain route, then you can
Hmm.
say, okay, well, here's just, before we send you out for the first two
Here's the
weeks,
drought.
just
Yeah, you
here.
could practice.
And you could give them real data. You know what I mean? You could just take
Yeah,
historical data of all the deliveries and just go, here,
yeah.
pretend
You
you've
touch on a
been the
really great
driver for
point,
the
right?
last month.
Like
Yeah.
like this type of technology is super data rich, right? Like that an organization, if they're using it, like they get so much more data than they normally would. Like it's one thing to put a driver in the driver's seat and then someone observes the driver as they're physically driving. Like, yes, they're getting data, but there's not the kind of like you're getting like eye tracking data if you have the right type of headset. You're able to look at how long do they look at the red light verkind how long they look at the
Yeah,
stop sign versus.
exactly. Which sort of brings up the idea of eye tracking, which it's kind of within a couple of years, most headsets will have at least
Mhm.
basic eye tracking, which doesn't necessarily give you detailed information like retinal, like with
Yeah,
your dilation, pupil dilation, but it at least you can at least use it to go, oh, you're looking at this object. So the way that the simple eye tracking works is when I'm building this world, I would pick that object or maybe this picture frame, and I would put a script on it that says, let me know if the user is looking at this picture
right.
frame.
Then you
And
know.
that's basically how that kind of stuff works. So
What is it like? Pico, HTC, Pico, they have eye tracking, right? I believe
Well, it
Uh,
depends on which model. There's a model of Pico that doesn't have eye tracking, but
oh,
then there's
okay.
another model that does have eye tracking, and it has basic eye tracking that I just described out of the box. But if you wish, you can purchase an additional license, and they're pretty expensive. I
Right, it's called
probably should mention
Toby. Is it what's the is it Toby?
it's Toby. So there's something
Toby,
called
yes.
Toby Pro, which does exactly the kind of information I'm talking about, the pupil dilation and that kind of thing. And
Now,
it's
there's rumor that the Meta Cambria might have eye tracking, if I'm
I
correct,
believe it
right?
will, and the question is, will it have the regular, will it have the
Hmm.
simple eye tracking like I'm talking, or the pro eye tracking? My guess it just will have the simple eye tracking
Now, from
because
your
the
experience, like, so the Pro eye tracking has like, what's the difference between like standard and Pro with eye tracking?
really the only reason you would need pro eye tracking is if you were say if you were doing sort of some sort of medical application or
Gotcha.
research in a lab for neurological conditions. So I think one of the reasons they don't want everyone to have access to the pupil dilation stuff is it's too creepy psychological. It's
Right.
like, no, because then we could show you a picture, and from your pupil dilation, we can tell if you liked it or not without you really giving us permission to probe your mind like that sort of thing. Whereas, you're looking at that thing over there or that thing over there is deemed fine.
Right.
It's they do make you sign licenses that require you not to do that sort of nefarious psychological
Oh,
kind of
interesting.
stuff.
Okay, okay. Interesting. And so yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, obviously, right, eye tracking is one, facial tracking is another thing, right? How do we, our evidence? I
Well,
go
that's
going back
another
to
one
our,
where you could do nefarious things with both.
yeah.
What I don't get though, okay, and so because I've sort of worked with some of this facial recognition stuff for a while, and normally you would have it started a long time ago. You had to take a webcam image, like a full face image, and
Uh-huh.
submit it to an algorithm, which would go look and would go, okay, here are the main facial features. Here's the corner of the lips. Here where the eyes are, and that sort of things. It would find landmarks and tell you where they were. And then over the years, people have written layers on top of that kind of interpret what that means. So,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them use, machine learning and just throw a million images at the thing where we know this is a happy face, we know this is a sad face, and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So, to do machine learning, you have to have a big data set. You also have to know the answer to the question that you're building this machine learning thing to,
Right.
to answer, right? So if you want to build a machine learning thing that we want to know if a person's happy, sad, what their
Mm-hmm.
emotion is, then you need a big data set, and it's called a labeled data set. So you need a big data set which is labeled correctly that this image is happy, this image is,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And the reliability of that rating is going to determine the reliability of your machine learning
Right.
object that you get out the other end. And we sort of talked about this at one point that we all use machine learning all the time and we don't realize it. And we're using the harvested, learned object that has already learned how to recognize whether a face is happy or sad. And the hand tracking stuff that I've talked about before
Mm-hmm.
is one of those things. Being able to recognize a hand pose is quite
Sure.
difficult,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
No.
faces.
Or faces. Well, this goes back to like the very beginning. Eric. I mean, our conversation started about Second Life, right? And this idea of virtual theater, right? And the I and so here we are, sort of discussing like the future of VR now. Like, it needs to have more data going out, like facial tracking, so to be able to show if I'm happy or sad in virtual reality, or show if I'm curious, and knowing where my eyes are actually looking. And of course, all that data helps. If a brand or an organization, right, turns to the idea of digital twinning, for employee training, for just standard workforce, or just learning how to iterate new ideas. Like, all of that sort of theatrical component, right, plays a big part in that.
Well, here's an interesting application of this stuff that is not obvious at all. And I don't know if it ever how far it got developed. But when I read the story at the time, basically one of the video conferencing companies, like where you're sitting at a camera and you're talking to a camera in
Mhm.
a big conference, a bunch of other people. So one of the things they wanted to do was basically take the camera feed and do exactly what I was saying, do the facial recognition thing. But we've also talked about photogrammetry before, and people have probably maybe used an application where we're going to create your avatar. Let's take a picture of your face, and we'll wrap it around a thing. Some of the video conferencing companies were talking about doing was using the facial recognition to figure out where your features were, creating a 3D model of your head, and basically figuring out, because then they could just figure out the delta. It's like, well, you're smiling, the 3D head is smiling or frowning, and basically on the other end, they would synthesize everybody by just creating a 3D model of their head with the texture wrapped around and moving their
Right.
stuff, their features, and then they don't have to send a video stream for a dozen people, and they're talking about, well, if we get 50 people in a conference, because
Hmm.
the numbers sort of get bad exponentially the more people you have. So,
How do you think they fix that, by the way? Like,
pardon me,
how do you think we can fix that? Like, what is the solution to having more people, you know,
not to have them
into?
all within earshot of each other. Really, it's
Is
that
that what it is?
simple.
Okay.
Yeah, because we can do visually. We already have these things in Unity. There's a thing that I would put on your avatar, like a script, basically,
Hmm.
and basically when I'm looking at your avatar, my camera code is going to say how far away are they. Oh, they have this script. This script gives me a little we call it like a billboard, and it's basically it's
Hmm.
just it's like a bill, like when they have a cardboard cutout of a celebrity at a thing, and they're just hi. So what that does is it basically allows us to just say, well, every second we're going to render a new billboard for people that are
Right.
more than a certain distance away. And otherwise, I don't even have to load your geometry. I don't have to hear your audio. And audio is the worst one because I just can't. Well, when I say I mean technically, it's not feasible to relay everyone's what everyone is saying to everybody else. So, for three people in a room, sure, that would work. But if we got in a room with 30 people,
Right.
how, like, there's no feasible way for me to say, okay, well, we'll make it each person's responsibility to send everybody else a stream. No, that won't work, because now you got to send your stream to 30 people. You can't say, well, we'll make the main server responsible for sending that stream to 30 people, because now it has to send 30 audio streams to everybody, and that's going to get worse and worse, and you get 60
Hmm.
people. It's just not going to be feasible. So um so the only solution to that really is to have the server mix everybody a stream. There's this great big audio mixer panel, and every time someone new joins, they get a new mixer board control. And when you hear the audio, the server has already mixed the audio. Now there are exceptions to that. We have the megaphone mechanism, so that may actually go,
Hmm.
okay, well, now you've got a one dedicated audio stream and all the other ones are mixed. But it's sort of interesting because that brings us full circle, which means we're about to end soon probably. But that brings us full circle to Second Life, because
Hmm.
in Second Life, they had to do that audio mixing, but the guy who invented Second Life, Philip Rosedale, who actually his background, I believe, he created Real Player, which was an audio thing, before he
Yeah,
made
we've talked
Second
about this.
Life.
Yes. Yeah, we've
And
talked
then
about
he
this.
went on to create High Fidelity, which was a virtual world place that was dedicated to people who really did have VR headsets. And then after a few years, they basically kind of shut that stuff down. But he spent a year or two working on an audio solution that scales to
Mm-hmm.
massive sizes
Yeah.
with the feature of audio bubbles. So everybody, like the designer of a space can go, here's a sphere. Everybody in this sphere can hear each other, and nobody outside of the
Mm-hmm.
sphere can hear you. That solves the scaling problem in one way by giving the designer the ability to go, no, which makes sort of sense. Why should I hear somebody out there who's playing basketball?
Right. When you
In a
when it's just like
real room,
just
I
this
wouldn't hear them,
conversation.
right? Yeah. So that's what he's done, and now he's gone back to Second Life, and probably is rolling those audio features into Second Life and looking at this renewed interest in metaverses.
Mm-hmm.
I just said there were more than one. I
Yeah,
shouldn't have said
that's
that.
it's in the title,
The
Pete.
metaverse. There's only one metaverse. But yeah, so yeah, he's gone back to Second Life because of the renewed interest in the metaverse, and
Yeah.
he's seeing these other people trying to do them, and he's going, "No, that's not how you're supposed to do
Mm-hmm.
these things." So that might be an interesting place for us to go
Yeah.
and do a
Excellent.
vlog in.
Yeah, we'll do that. Well, look it. We will definitely. I think this has been a great. This has been awesome. This is an awesome conversation today. And of course, uh, thanks to all of you because we are at our 1 hour mark, and of course, thanks to everybody for listening. And obviously, Pete, you're always just this like cavern of amazing of knowledge, and I love going into these deep dive and rabbit holes with you, and always cool to have as the co-host of the show. And of course, thank you, Alan, our producer, and thanks to all of you. And yeah, thanks for listening or watching if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, our next show, obviously we will dive deeper into Pete's brain and see what else we can dig up and talk about and see sort of where all this technology is going. So, but anyway, well, thanks everyone, and have a great day.
All right, later.
Later, Gator.